What is going on, people? It's James here from LFC Transfer Room, and today I'm bringing you a brand new feature called Player vs. Player. With the FA Cup final tomorrow and the media going, Trent versus Reece James. Trent's great at this, Reece James is great at this, they're not good at this, they're better at this. I thought, what better than to do a player versus player comparison, see who's better, see who's going to win the FA Cup of a player versus player right back challenge. We're going to start by basically building it into a category of 5 categories. We're going to look at 5 things. We're going to look at XG stats, we're going to look at attack, we're going to look at defense, we're going to look at possession, and we're going to look at team play. And by doing this, we're going to work out who is the best right back of them all and who's going to win the FA Cup of right backs. So the first stat that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the XG stats. And these are stats for the minutes that they play. What sort of impact would you expect them to have on a pitch? So, for example, per game, the XG for Trent Alexander-Arnold is 0.07. So they expect him to score a goal every 0.07 games. Now for Reece James, that's 0.08 games. Where it gets really interesting is when you start to look at assists. Trent's 0.26 and Reece James is 0.18. And when you put them together, it's actually surprisingly close. It's 0.33 for Trent for goal plus assists per 90 minutes, and it's 0.26 for Reece James. So every 0.26 of a game, or every 25% of games, Reece James will get a goal and assist. In every 33% of games, Trent Alexander-Arnold will get a goal or assist. It was actually very, very close. I mean, when you look at goals and assists combined, nearly 40% of the games Trent Alexander-Arnold gets it. For Reece James, it's 21% of the games. And it's down to the amount of minutes and time on the pitch that Trent plays in comparison to Reece James. But if Reece James can get himself fit, his goals and assists from an XG perspective are quite close to Trent's. It's not that big a difference. Having said that, round 1 goes to Trent for the XG stats. So the next one that we're going to look at is we're going to look at attack. We're going to look at how the players attack, how they sort of aid their teams with the attacking intent and how they help generate goals. Who is the better goal and shot creator? Who is the better performer? Now, already we know so far this season, Reece James has scored far more goals than Trent, but we also know that Trent has assisted far more. One of the things that I'm going to start off by looking at is the number of crosses that they've done per 90 minutes across their careers. Because everyone just expects that Trent just pings the ball across box and it's our front 3 that score it. But actually, Reece James delivers more crosses per 90 minutes than Trent Alexander-Arnold does throughout his career. 4.66 crosses per game to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 4.54. So it's not necessarily the crosses that seem to be generating the Trent the goals, but obviously he sprays the ball around, he does all that, and we'll get onto possession in a little bit. But let's have a look at the shot creating actions per 90 minutes. And the shot creating actions per 90 minutes is Trent Alexander-Arnold creates 3.7 shots per 90 minutes. And Reece James generates 3.12 shots per 90 minutes. Then we can go to what is referred to as goal creating actions. Trent generates 50.51 per 90 minutes, Reece James 0.29. So in those situations, Trent's currently ahead. Now, if we look at their shooting statistics, shots per game or shots per 90 minutes, Trent is 1.32, Reece James is 1.23. So Reece James takes less shots and has less shots on target per 90 minutes, but his goal return is 0.08 to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 0.07. So, and the average distance per shot is around about the same, 23 feet to 20 feet. Obviously, Trent takes a lot more free kicks, but really, it comes down when you compare the two together. The shot creating actions, when you're talking about 0.01% difference, it therefore comes down to the creation actions of their assists and their goals and what they're doing in terms of creating opportunities. At this moment in time, per 90 minutes, Trent is around about creating half an opportunity more per game than Reece James. So on that, once again, he just takes it. So Trent's 2 up, but it's not been a walk in the park against Reece James. The next one we're going to look at is we're going to look at defence. This is the one where everyone says Reece James is light years above Trent Alexander-Arnold. This is where Trent Alexander-Arnold lets himself down. Trent can't defend. Well, that's not true. Actually, when we start to look at the defensive actions and we start to go through the stats, Trent can defend. I think it just comes down to the position of where they start to defend from. So, interestingly, tackles 1 per game. Trent is 0.94, so nearly 1 tackle 1 per game. Reece James is 1.28. So Reece James is on average winning around about a third more tackles per game than Trent Alexander-Arnold is. Where them tackles are, a lot of them seem to be in the middle third of the pitch, which you would expect as a wing-back that Reece James is. But his tackle, he actually gets dribbled past more. His percentage of success against tackling dribblers is 0.39 to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 44. And the number of times he gets dribbled past per game is 1.21 to Trent's 1. What's interesting, though, is pressures and successful pressures. Reece James pressurizes the ball. He's 14 pressures per game to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 10. And his successful pressures is 4 per game to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 3.6. And while Trent has a better pressure success, you see that Reece James is a proactive defender. He's proactively defending. Now, what gets really interesting is when you start to look at blocks. Reece James has 2 per game to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 1.4. But interceptions and clearances, Trent Alexander-Arnold's 1.8 to Reece James 1. And clearances is 2.26 to Reece James's 1.4. So when you look at all the tackles and interception data together, Trent Alexander-Arnold actually makes 3.6 positive defensive contributions per game to Reece James's 3.56. It is that close. But it seems Trent can defend. And the final thing that I looked at is recoveries. At what point does that defender help the team recover the ball? And this is one where Trent is actually infinitely more successful than Reece James. And again, I think it's a positional thing, but Trent has 9.9 recoveries per game. So he will recover the ball 10 times per game. Now, Reece James is 8.5. And I think it's a lot down to where they're starting position, which is why I think Reece James has more pressures and Trent has more recoveries, tackles, and interceptions. But stat for stat, comparison to comparison, it's 3-0 to Trent. The next one we're looking at is possession, and this is the one where I was surprised when I was looking at the data. When you look at the progressive carries, when you're looking at how you retain the ball, Reece James' pass completion is 85%. Trent's is 74%. The total distance in yards per 90 minutes, Trent's is 1,300, Reece James is 1,100. And the progressive distance is 500 versus 300. But at every single category, Reece James's distribution has a higher success rate. 92 versus 88, 88 versus 81, 65 versus 52, when you get to long passes. So it seems that Reece James has a better success when passing the ball. Now, the next thing to look at is when they're dribbling the ball. You know, do they lose possession when they've got hold of the ball? And again, this is probably a benefit of Reece James playing higher up the field. But once again, Reece James is very successful at running with the ball. His touches is around about 5 less per game than Trent, but his successful dribbles is 1.5 per game compared to Trent Alexander-Arnold's 0.87. His successful dribble percentage is 75% to Trent's 51%. His progressive distance with the ball is further than Trent's. His carries are 2 more a game than Trent's. So what we're seeing here is with Reece James playing probably higher up the pitch, probably running with the ball, being that offensive player, he is actually better and currently more successful in possession than Trent Alexander-Arnold, even though Trent may be taking risks, maybe getting more aggressive passing. Reece James retains the ball better. His success at medium, long, and short range are all better than Trent's. So whether you like it or not, it's 3-1 to Trent Alexander-Arnold, but Reece James is better in possession. Now, the final category comes down to team success. And this is the fundamental. How vital are they to their team? So the first thing we look at is the number of points per game each player generates. Trent Alexander-Arnold, when he's on the pitch with his team, their team generate 2.29 points per game. Reece James, when he plays, it's 1.54. Now, Chelsea have imploded, exploded, imploded, exploded, imploded, exploded. So we can't just base team success on that one metric. What we can do, though, is we can look at the plus or minus goals scored or allowed whilst that player is on the pitch. So what is the positive difference they make whilst playing? Now, both players have a positive impact on the net goals scored versus against whilst on the pitch. But Trent Alexander-Arnold has scored, whilst he's on the pitch, the team score an extra 1.36 goals per game. So 1.3 goals per game. And Reece James is 0.19. So when you convert that per 90 and when you convert it to the benefit of them being on or off the pitch, the benefit Liverpool have of having Trent Alexander-Arnold on the pitch is a lot more by almost 1.2 goals per game than it is Reece James. Reece James is a fantastic player, but it seems the risks that that Trent's taking in possession, where he's generating the impact and the goals, is where it's having a very positive impact on the team success that Liverpool are having. And they seem to be beating Reece James' stats whilst he's on the pitch for Chelsea. So this is another win for Trent, making it 4-1. So fundamentally, what it comes down to is Trent Alexander-Arnold is the winner, and Liverpool are going to win the FA Cup. Please like, subscribe to the video. If you disagree with anything that I've said, I want to hear it in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say. Also, if there's another player versus player comparison that you want us to do, please put it in the chat. We are here to support you. Thank you for your support in the channel so far. This has been LFC Transfer Room. This has been player versus player. This has been Trent Alexander-Arnold versus Reece James. And we'll catch you on the next one.